Have you ever felt like you're living life on autopilot? Like there's a version of you, a stronger, more confident, more alive version, trapped somewhere deep inside, watching through your eyes as you go through the motions? You make resolutions, you set goals. You feel a fleeting surge of inspiration after watching a movie or reading a book, convinced that this time will be different. And for a day, maybe a week, it is. But then, slowly, inevitably, the old patterns creep back in. The gravitational pull of your old habits, your old fears, your old stories proves too strong. You find yourself right back where you started, wondering what's wrong with you. Why can some people seem to bend reality to their will, achieving massive success, deep fulfillment, and vibrant health, while so many of us, with the same 24 hours in a day, feel like we're just passengers? This isn't a rare feeling. It's a silent epidemic of quiet desperation. It's the gap between the life we live and the life we know deep down we were meant to live. It's a question that can haunt you in the dead of night. What is the invisible force that truly shapes our destiny? There was once a young man who wasn't just pondering this question. He was being crushed by it. He was a janitor, overweight, broke, and living in a tiny 400-square-foot bachelor apartment in Venice, California. He was lonely and deeply unhappy. His name was Tony Robbins, and his life wasn't a testament to human potential. It was a case study in human suffering. But that suffering became the fuel for an obsession, a relentless quest to find a real, practical, and immediate answer to that universal question. This isn't just a story about his book. It's the story of how he dismantled the machinery of human limitation, piece by piece, and discovered the levers of control that exist within every single one of us. To truly understand the power of his discoveries, you have to understand the world he was trying to escape. Imagine a home life not of warmth and security, but of chaos and violence. Tony grew up with a mother who loved him but was addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs, making her behavior terrifyingly unpredictable. He recalls holidays ruined by screaming matches, and a particularly traumatic Thanksgiving when his mother, in a rage, poured liquid soap all over his head and chased him out of the house with a carving knife. He ran, found a payphone, and called his father, who had long since left, begging him to come and get him. His father's response was a crushing blow. "Son, I can't. She's your mother." In that moment, he felt a profound sense of abandonment and powerlessness. This wasn't a one-time event. It was the texture of his childhood. He learned to become a practical psychologist just to survive, try to read his mother's moods to know when to be funny, when to be quiet, when to be invisible. The constant stress took a toll, leading him to seek comfort in food, and by his early teens, he weighed nearly 270 pounds. The other kids called him Fat Boy, and the shame was a physical weight he carried long after the school bell rang. When he was 17, his mother, armed with another knife, chased him out of the house for the final time. He never went back. He found work as a janitor, but the internal chaos just manifested in new ways. He was living in that tiny apartment, so poor he was washing his dishes in his bathtub. He was lonely, depressed, and felt completely out of control of his life. He described himself as a fat slob, whose only ambition was to make enough money to one day afford a limo with a jacuzzi in the back. It was a cheap dream born from a life of profound lack. The turning point wasn't a single lightning bolt, but a slow burn of absolute desperation. One Thanksgiving, consumed with his own misery, he heard about a family in his neighborhood who couldn't afford a holiday meal. On a whim, he took what little money he had, bought a full Thanksgiving dinner, and delivered it anonymously. The gratitude he saw in their eyes sparked something in him. He realized that if he, in his miserable state, could make a difference for someone else, then his life had to have more meaning than he was giving it. He made a vow that day to become the kind of man who could help people on a massive scale. This vow, however, didn't magically fix his problems. The real crisis came from a deep, agonizing frustration. He began reading voraciously. Over 700 books on psychology, philosophy, and self-help, desperate for an answer. But all he found were theories, endless talk about why people were broken, but no practical tools for how to fix them. He was drowning, and the world was offering him books on the theory of swimming. The pain of staying where he was, overweight, broke, and powerless, finally became greater than the pain of the unknown. He decided that he would no longer settle. He would find the real tools, the strategies that created immediate and lasting change, or he would die trying. His life became a laboratory, and he was the first test subject. His first major breakthrough came not from a book, but from a simple, profound observation. He started attending seminars and studying people who were masters in their fields, successful athletes, brilliant therapists, powerful leaders. He noticed they all shared something, but it wasn't their background or their education. It was their physiology. There was a certain energy, a command in their posture, a power in their voice, a look of certainty in their eyes. They literally carried themselves differently. Meanwhile, he looked at people who were depressed and struggling. They all share a common physiology too. Slumped shoulders, shallow breathing, downcast eyes, quiet, hesitant voices. The connection seemed too simple to be true, but he decided to test it. He began to experiment on himself. Whenever he felt depressed, instead of collapsing into the feeling, he would force himself to do the opposite. He would stand up straight, pull his shoulders back, put a huge, ridiculous grin on his face, and breathe deeply. He would speak in a powerful, energetic tone, even if he was just talking to himself. What he discovered was astonishing. He couldn't stay depressed. The feeling would simply evaporate. It wasn't that he was faking it till he made it. He was discovering a biological fact. Emotion is not something that happens to us. It is something we create with our bodies. He codified this into a concept he called the triad. Our emotional state, at any given moment, is a direct result of three forces: our physiology, our focus, and our language. Change any one of these, and you immediately change how you feel. The physiology part was a revelation. It meant that you could, on demand, generate feelings of confidence, happiness, or power, simply by adopting the physical patterns of someone who already felt that way. It was a remote control for your own brain. But physiology was only 1/3 of the equation. He realized the immense power of focus. What we focus on becomes our reality. He saw that people who were stuck in a negative state were consistently asking themselves disempowering questions. They would ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" Or "What's wrong with me?" Their brains, like a faithful search engine, would diligently go to work finding all the evidence to support that miserable conclusion. He realized that the quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of the questions you habitually ask yourself. He started consciously changing his questions. Instead of "Why can't I lose weight?" he started asking, "How can I enjoy the process of getting fit and healthy?" Instead of "Why am I so broke?" he asked, "How can I create massive value for others and have fun doing it?" These weren't just positive affirmations. They were commands to his nervous system to seek out solutions, opportunities, and resources that he was previously blind to. A single, well-formed question could redirect the entire focus of the mind from the problem to the possibility. This was the first great lever he had discovered. People weren't broken. They were just running lousy patterns. They were using their bodies and their brains in ways that guaranteed suffering. The giant within wasn't some mystical entity. It was the latent capacity to consciously direct your own state. For the first time, he felt a sense of control, a tangible pathway out of the prison of his past. Armed with this new understanding of state, Robbins began to create incredible changes in his own life and in the lives of his first clients. He lost 38 pounds, started his own business, and began to feel a sense of power and direction he had never known. He could help someone snap out of a lifetime of depression in a single session, not by talking about their mother for 10 years, but by getting them to radically change their physiology and the questions they were asking. But a new, more complex problem began to emerge. The changes were real, but for some, they weren't permanent. He would work with someone, help them reach a peak state of motivation and clarity, and they would leave his seminar feeling like they could conquer the world. But a few weeks or months later, he'd get a call, and they'd be right back where they started. The old patterns, the old anxieties, the old habits had returned. It was like pulling a weed but leaving the root. Changing your state was powerful, but it was often a temporary fix if the underlying neurological wiring remained the same. Why did people keep snapping back to behaviors they knew were destructive? Why would someone who desperately wanted to be healthy keep reaching for junk food? Why would someone who craved a loving relationship keep sabotaging their chances at intimacy? The answer, he discovered, lay in a force far more primitive and powerful than logic: the twin forces of pain and pleasure. He realized that everything we do, every single action we take or fail to take, is driven by our brain's attempt to avoid pain or gain pleasure. This isn't a conscious, rational process. It's a deeply ingrained, reflexive system of conditioning. The reason we procrastinate on a project isn't because we're lazy. It's because, at a neurological level, our brain has associated more immediate pain with starting the task, effort, focus, potential failure, than with putting it off, which offers immediate pleasure of relief and distraction. This led him to his second great discovery, which he called neuroassociative conditioning. The giant within isn't just about managing your state in the moment. It's about systematically rewiring the deep-seated associations of pain and pleasure that control your behavior automatically. To create lasting change, you have to do two things. First, you must associate massive, unbearable, gut-wrenching pain with your old, unwanted pattern. Not intellectual pain, but real, visceral, emotional pain. Then, you must associate overwhelming, ecstatic pleasure with a new, empowering pattern you want to create. For example, he tells the story of working with a man who was addicted to chocolate. The man knew it was bad for his health, but he couldn't stop. Robbins didn't give him a diet plan. Instead, he had the man describe, in exquisite detail, the pleasure he got from eating chocolate. The smell, the texture, the taste. Then, right as the man was experiencing that peak pleasure in his mind, Robbins would interrupt the pattern. He'd have him imagine that instead of chocolate, he was eating a handful of his favorite cockroaches covered in chocolate. He made the man vividly imagine the crunch, the squish, the taste. The man was disgusted, almost sick. He repeated this process, linking the thought of chocolate to the intense revulsion of eating bugs. He was scrambling the old neurological pathway. Afterwards, when offered a piece of his favorite chocolate, the man physically recoiled. His nervous system had a new association. Chocolate no longer equaled pleasure. It equaled profound pain. This wasn't about willpower. Willpower is a finite resource. This was about changing the very command his brain sent before willpower was even needed. He had changed the root of the behavior, not just the leaves. This principle was a key to eliminating fears, phobias, and self-destructive habits in minutes, not years. But it was also the key to installing new, positive habits. To get yourself to love exercise, for instance, you have to stop associating it with pain, soreness, effort, and start linking it to massive pleasure. You have to vividly imagine the feeling of energy, the pride, the strength, the vitality that comes from moving your body, and you have to link excruciating pain to the idea of being sedentary, weak, and unhealthy. By consciously and repeatedly rehearsing these new associations, you literally recondition your nervous system to drive you towards your goals, making motivation automatic. For a time, these two principles seemed like separate, powerful tools in his arsenal. You could change your state to feel good now, and you could use neuroassociation to change your behaviors for the long term. But the true, unifying insight, the grand aha moment, came when he realized they weren't separate at all. They were two parts of a single, dynamic, and interconnected system. It was a feedback loop that governed the entirety of human experience. The state you are in, Principle 1, radically alters what you link pain and pleasure to, Principle 2. When you're in a state of courage and confidence, you're more likely to associate pleasure with taking risks and facing challenges. When you're in a state of fear and uncertainty, you'll associate pain with the very same actions. At the same time, your deeply embedded neuroassociations, Principle 2, determine your default states, Principle 1. If you have a lifelong association of pain with public speaking, just the thought of giving a presentation will automatically trigger a physiological state of terror. The two principles were constantly influencing each other, creating either a downward spiral of limitation or an upward spiral of empowerment. The question was, what was the master control? What was the single element that could direct this entire system? The answer was the power of a true decision. Robbins came to define a decision in a way that most people never consider. A true decision is not saying, I'd like to quit smoking. That's a preference. A true decision, from the Latin root decidere, which means to cut off from, is the moment you commit to a result and cut yourself off from any other possibility. It's the moment you say, I am now a non-smoker. When you make a decision like that, You are issuing a command to your entire being. That single act will become a catalyst that forces you to align your states and your neuroassociations with your new identity. When you truly decide to become a healthy person, you no longer tolerate states of lethargy. You consciously change your physiology and focus to generate energy. You also begin to actively rewire your pain and pleasure associations. You link pain to junk food and pleasure to nutritious meals. You link pain to the couch and pleasure to the gym. The decision is the seed. Managing your state and reconditioning your neurology are how you water that seed and make it grow. This was the ultimate realization. We are not our past. We are not our habits. We are not our feelings. We are the directors of our own minds. The giant within is not a metaphor for some hidden talent. It is a conscious, decision-making part of you that has the ability to take command of your own psychological and biological machinery. It's the understanding that your biography is not your destiny. Your destiny is forged in your moments of decision. The entire framework was complete. It wasn't about one magic trick. It was about understanding the fundamental operating system of human consciousness and learning how to consciously direct it, for the first time, toward the life you were designed to live. We just traveled a path of profound discovery, a journey that began in a tiny apartment filled with desperation and ended with a map to the inner workings of the human spirit. We saw how a desperate young man, tormented by a feeling of powerlessness, refused to accept his circumstances. He dove into the heart of human psychology and emerged with two fundamental levers of change: the immediate power to alter your emotional state by changing your body and your focus, and the long-term power to reshape your destiny by reconditioning what your nervous system links pain and pleasure to. And finally, we saw how these two forces are united and commanded by the single most powerful tool you possess, the power of a true decision. But understanding this journey is only the beginning. Knowledge is not power. It is only potential power. Execution is what transforms potential into reality. So the blueprint is simple, though not easy. First, take immediate control of your state. Right now, as you're listening, stand up taller, pull your shoulders back, take a deep breath, and ask yourself a better question. What am I truly grateful for in my life right now? Feel the shift. That power is always available to you. Second, get crystal clear on what you will no longer tolerate in your life. What is the one pattern or behavior that you will now associate with absolute, unbearable pain? And what is the new standard you will commit to, linking it with every ounce of pleasure you can muster? Finally, make a real decision. Not a wish, not a preference. Choose one area of your life, your health, your career, your relationships, and decide from the core of your being that you are cutting off any other possibility than the standard you demand for yourself. This journey of awakening your own giant doesn't have to be a decade-long quest. It can begin with a single, committed step. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you feel that spark of possibility, then consider this your moment of decision. Subscribing to this channel isn't just about watching more videos. It's a declaration. It's a small but significant commitment to yourself that you are done being a passenger and are ready to become the master of your own experience. You are joining a community of people who believe that our lives are not meant to be left to chance. The giant has been sleeping long enough. The only question left is, will you decide to wake it up?